Set up my studio, set up my studio, set up the studio. All right. So, yeah. Did you know that car prices are expensive? So, in case you guys have not been keeping up, car prices are already through the roof. Well, wake up, babes, and smell the coffee because it's probably going to get more expensive. And in this video, I'll be talking about that. What's up, guys? My name is Chris, and welcome to The Breakdown, where we talk about everything cars, news, and reviews. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're not, as always, welcome back. So, I've talked about a lot of different things, and I know you guys like the nostalgia videos and the old recaps and retrospectives, which I try to give those, but I think it's incredibly important that I talk about also the state of cars, because without the state of cars today, we do not have that nostalgia. So in today's video, I want to talk about car prices and how they may never be the same. Purely speculation, purely a prediction. I could be entirely wrong, but in case you've been keeping up with my videos, I tend not to necessarily be wrong.
Oh, what a loon I am.
So with that being said, stick around and stay tuned because you are now watching The Breakdown. Okay, so first things first, I had to totally redo this video several times. And if you guys don't know, I work 3 jobs. So it is very difficult to do these things. And I hate to keep making I'm sounding excuses.
I'm not ready. I couldn't do my hair and I ain't got no wig glue.
But unfortunately, I'm poor and I got to do this myself in-house. So welcome to the club. The first thing that I want to go over in terms of car prices, I think the first thing to talk about is how people just are not keeping cars as much as they used to. Cars used to be a thing that you did once in every 10 years. Most people, and my best friend made a really good point about how they're more like appliances. They're just big ticket appliances. And so that really put it into perspective for me for how cars are perceived by the average consumer. And according to Kelley Blue Book, many people have gone from holding on to their cars between 6 to 8 years and 10 to 12, but now it's anywhere between 5 and 12 years. Some people like to hold on to their cars for a long time, but as technology has evolved, and we know once technology gets integrated into things, it rapidly ages whatever that product is. Think about how much the iPhone has changed so much in the last 15 to 16 years as opposed to something as simple as the telephone changing over the course of 40 to 50 years. And it's just a simple example. But cars used to be very simple and didn't have anywhere near the nooks and nannies that we have now. Nowadays, because of that technology, because the increased safety, it has driven up the cost of cars. Now, I talked about this. I talked about this in my video on 2007 because it's a very pivotal year. And I've also talked about this in other videos about the inflation of cars and how we as consumers just are feeling the swamp of it. So I'm going to say this confidently, and come here when I say this. We're all poor. Now, it doesn't mean that cars have not kept up with inflation. It just means that our wages have not. But nonetheless, we still feel lesser buying power when it comes to buying these cars. Car prices back in the early 2000s, way before the pandemic, there was once a time that cars could be easily had for pretty much next to nothing, especially during use, because there was an oversupply of cars. From 2007 onward, the car companies have had to rally up in how they were going to adjust to these climate change crisis solutions, if you will, and try to make it also affordable for Americans. Now, we were on a pace that we were going to be doing all right. But of course, the universe said we can't have and so they said, let's go throw in a pandemic in there. And when cars were correcting themselves from the Great Recession, once again, we had another issue with supply chain shortages during the pandemic. Now, that is really where car prices solidified as they're never going back to the way that they were. I tried to get these things as concise as possible, but I know I can ramble, so feel free to skip ahead if you just want to know what I said at the end of the video. But you might want to stay tuned for the journey because it's a really good story. So during 2020, we had a really interesting moment where people had a really bad case of FOMO. And like the toilet tissue that everybody had to beat each other up over for whatever reason, because I know I don't think y'all are full of shit, but a lot of people are full of shit. Maybe that's why it was a lot of tissue, because people are full of shit. I don't know. Terrible joke. But during the pandemic, there was a lot of time where the people had decided that they needed to get a car right then and right now. And manufacturers and their lending arms made it a thing to not only pay over sticker what the car was, and dealers also have a hand in this, but that's a whole different spiel in itself. But not only was it low cost to borrow the money of buying a car, but banks were allowing people to pay significantly more for what the cars were worth versus the book value. Because of that, the lot of people that bought cars in between 2020 and 2023 pretty much have either paid too much in cash for them or they've overpaid in financing. And unfortunately, that is slowly coming to bite us in the butt. But I also see in this new arena at the time of this recording that car prices are going to go up even more because of those favorite things we know about tariffs. Now, this isn't a political conversation, but it is important to include this. Tariffs are going to impact everything that is either Canadian or Mexican or has some form of components of Canada or Mexico within them. Now, it was extended up until another month at the time of this recording to April 1st. And so we are beginning to see some different rollbacks in what is being had, but that's not the point of this video. In addition to the safety features and the efficiency of cars, the technology has also improved. And of course, with technology costs more money. But the bigger part that is going to happen is that even if cars do go down, wages still have not kept up. So we are still going to feel the pain points of that. And I want to also talk about electrification as well. So as the industry as itself is really working to decide where we're going to go, because half of the car companies out there have decided they're going to completely opt out of electrification, and some have gone all the way in. See Jaguar, because apparently y'all like that video. Jaguar is just one minor example, but many of the electric car companies are really up in the air, especially with the way that Tesla is going and them leading the way in the pricing of those vehicles. But many car companies have invested so much money behind electrification and behind the research and development, which also research and development ties into the cost of the car. And as we search for the silver bullet of trying to regulate fuel economy as well as correct climate change, it is going to be an uphill battle for many car companies because a lot of consumers simply want big V8s and V6s, and even then those still weren't cheap. But there's been so much research and development that has been put out there that has made it very difficult for car companies to price cars more effectively. And if we're really being honest, car prices probably will never go back to the same way they were, typically because people, even though they still can't afford these cars, still have to make room to afford these cars. And car affordability as a crisis in a whole, and I've talked about this in another video because I talk about a lot of different things, that it is becoming more and more of a crisis for Americans in particular. I'm not really sure about international, but I can tell you that in the States here, we are struggling to pay our bills. And so all of those things have come together and become more and more of a problem in terms of affordability. But because we continue to make car payments work, regardless of how expensive they are, they're probably not going to have much incentive, and they being the car companies, probably not going to have much incentive to try to, I don't know, fix the problem. And so those things aside, we also have to consider that insurance has become much more expensive. Now, I have my gripes with insurance, as most of us do. I also believe that insurance accounts for a lot of things we don't necessarily account for. It is pure greed to some degree. I'm not going to hold you, but I do think from a business standpoint, there are reasons for why they do the price hikes. It's just that the price hikes are so out of reasonable range that it makes it that much more harder to afford a car. And if we're being honest, it's getting to the point now that more insurance premiums are starting to outpace the car payments themselves. In addition to that, more and more people are getting their cars serviced with more technological implementations, and more people are starting to get their car serviced with different technological issues. And so because of that, there is a lot of reasons why car prices simply are going to stay where they are, if not increase. And as these tariffs become implemented, if they are implemented, we don't necessarily know. But if they are implemented, cars are expected to increase by $3,000 to $10,000 according to reports. And so all of those things being said, we can pretty much kiss the days of $2,000 and $3,000 cars that are not somewhere with a bent front bumper and somewhere with a missing engine. Goodbye. I don't think that car prices have to go down, but I do think that wages need to come up. And I would argue we hadn't really had much success with that. So do with that information what you will. And so it's just something that you need to be conscious of. I wouldn't say fear mongering is probably the best way, but it is something to be said about being mindful of the idea that in fact, something does actually happen to your car, whether it be a repair or whether it be an accident. These new car prices and these used car prices do impact you to some degree. So don't think it don't impact you, because it does, babes. But with that being said, you guys leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think. If you've been in the market for a car, let me know how that experience has been for you. And do you feel like car prices will ever go down? I know for all of my enthusiasts out there, they're hoping it goes down, but unfortunately we've been dealing with dealer markups for probably the last 15 years. So I'm gonna be honest with you, we're really used to the high prices. We don't really get a break, but that's besides the point. And with that being said, hopefully very soon in the next video, I will see you guys later.